Thank you for joining us and welcome back to our channel. In this episode, I really want to dive into the reason why the United States got it absolutely wrong in the country of Niger and how we came about until Niger kicked out the United States from that country. A lot has been going on with regards to the geopolitics in place, and no one focused on the condescending approach for the strategic engagement that the US was involved at that particular time. Here we talk about how Africa engages its strategic partners around the world. So I'm going to be diving into it and bring you some perspective on what absolutely went wrong and why African nations are making the decision themselves, and in the geopolitical circles it's not sitting well. If you are new here, I encourage you to smash the like button, share the video as we continue to inform you with regards to the continent's global perspective and why it wants to secure its place in the global discourse. So without any much delay, let me dive into it.
The American presence on the territory of the Republic of Niger is illegal and violates all the constitutional and democratic rules.
Precisely on March 17, Niger's National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, known as the CNSP, suspended its military agreement with the United States of America after a visit by senior United States of America's officials to the capital Niamey. The CNSP spokesperson said the decision was made after the United States of America's delegation warned the military regime against partnering with Russia and Iran. Niger, which hosts at that time about 1,000 United States of America's troops, and the drone base in Algadez, which has been in the process of dismantling at the moment, has been an important partner in Washington's counterterrorism engagement and operations in the region. But relations have deteriorated considerably since July 2023, when Niger's presidential guard had removed the democratically elected President Bazoum and installed General Abdourahmane, who currently leads the country. This is the fundamental of what happens, and Niger, like a lot of African countries, have decided to talk about some very important things that need to deal with their own nations, and that a lot of things are not going well. These countries have said it's not going to be business as usual. They want to take matters in their own hands and reshape their own future. And this doesn't sit well in the areas of the geopolitical partners. Russian influence looms large in Western discourse in the Sahel, and now informs the United States of America's policy and also that of other European partners, and the decision making is places like Niger. There is a big mistake that outsized focus on Russia misunderstands the scale and scope of Moscow's presence in the continent of Africa. More importantly, it ignores the long-standing pattern of governance and denies the role of Africans. This is important. It denies the role of African governments and the emerging pro-sovereignty movement and political blocs. Neither the United States of America nor the Russians are in a position to force Africans to choose sides. Efforts to do so will only result in rebuke. We have seen this total rebuke across the Sahel, how France has been asked to leave a number of countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, Niger, and most recently Ivory Coast of all, including the country of Senegal. So the pro-sovereignty aspect is always taken out of the discourse. It's as if it's Moscow that's calling the shot all the time. This is absolutely wrong and does not sit well with regards to African government. To an extent, Africans are making the decision on their own. African governments seek to balance outside power while retaining the ability to work with each other. Historically, local elites have leveraged those often unequal relationship with powerful states to enhance their own domestic position. In Francophone Africa, for example, the cozy relationship between French officials, companies, and African governments come to known as France-Afrique. Niger had become somewhat of an exception among its peers. However, when it pursues a close military ties with the United States of America, recent years have seen a wave of anti-French sentiment that has hit the Sahelian region. Military regimes seeking political legitimacy has helped formatted anti-French sentiment, but they do not control to an extent. The people of this region are beginning to make the decision, and those governments are listening to them. These countries want to make the choice on their own, and that's the reason why we see the huge anti-French sentiment across the region. Don't forget, France has been a partner with these countries for years, and they have dominated this region for quite over centuries, and the results hasn't been proven to be more effective from the economic aspect, the developmental aspect, the cultural engagement, and the pharmaceutical side, infrastructure, not to talk about that. So these were issues and challenges that were boiling in the minds of regions around this particular part of the continent of Africa. Even though Washington historically ceded policy priorities in Francophone Africa to France, anti-French sentiment did not carry over to the anti-American sentiment in Niger. Close military relationship and the humanitarian field still weighs in. It appears that the United States of America's delegation visit to Niamey in March, led by Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Molly Field, and African Commander General Michael Langley, did significant damage. Sahel expert, according to Alex Tonton, he noted that reported unilateral announcement of the United States of America delegation visit and the relative low-rank visiting officials may have played a part. The subjects of the talk, Niger turned towards Russia and Iran, appears to have been equally insulting. Ironically, the United States of America delegation attempt to counter Russian influence in Niger has further pushed the CNSP to seek ties with Russia. This notion that it's always in the media that every international expert or delegation that goes to these countries, low-ranking officials going to African countries to get to meet African leaders, is unacceptable sometimes. And when the leaders of these countries, of which if you compare the ranks, they are not up to generals in some of those countries, and they are not up to the status of the president of those nations, but they continue to flock to these African nations. And once the leaders of these countries say, I don't want to meet with this particular person, it's as if they are not respecting the protocol. But this is a head of state. You want them to meet a low-ranking official. Let me just ask this. Can an African general just leave Niger, for example, come to Washington or plan a meeting and said they want to meet the US president? That's not going to happen. We've seen situations where Kenyan officials, Liberian officials have requested to an extent to meet even a US congressperson. That doesn't happen. So this is a big problem. So by undermining a military general at a time when the tense situation in the country, and you expect that this should be okay to meet the president of a nation, and then you are refused by the prime minister, or you have to meet the prime minister first, or the delegation refuses you to see the president, and if that is a problem in a geopolitical terms, I think it's a huge blunder. That is a condescending approach to look at the leader of a sovereign nation as if they cannot make their own decision. Like I said, the United States focus on Russia misses the reality that Africans, not Russia or Americans, are driving major political shift in the Sahel region. The formation of the Alliance of Sahelian states, normally known as the AES, for example, was a project initiated by Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, first and foremost, to counteract the military threat from regional bloc ECOWAS. That Russian welcomed the development does not mean Moscow inspired it. We fail to understand that African nations are calling the shot themselves. And until Africa's geopolitical partners start understanding that these countries are the ones who are the forefront of the decision based on their colonial history, based on their strategic engagement with their partners, specifically a country like France, based on the historical perspective. And at the moment, there is a huge drive in terms of sovereign engagement. We've seen that in Chad. We've seen that in Senegal. I wonder what this was surprising to other geopolitical partners. So the United States failed to understand that Niger was at the forefront of decision making. The geopolitical spectrum was that it's Russia that is pushing that narrative. I think this doesn't sit well in the continent of Africa. This is a very important point to be stressed, that the continent does not like this particular narrative, that each time they move forward to take their sovereignty, to engage or make strategic choices, it's as if they've been influenced by China or by Russia. So this is a derogatory perspective from the continent's own side of view. I'm talking about this because we see documents, we see information, we see collaboration, we see the pushback in a number of areas. These narratives have to stop. Otherwise, coming to power, Donald Trump will be in soon. It's going to get worse. Something more. Indeed, the overthrow of Bazoum was unexpected in Moscow, as it was in Washington. The coup was a surprise with no obvious advantage at the time. A Russian diplomat in the region admitted, based on our research, Western media were still quick to divine that Russia's hands were in that particular conflict. The implicit was that they believed that Russian influence thrives in instability and can spill across the border, which is a wrong notion. Such tropes, however, fail to account for a basic building block of political personal relationship. Russia's arrival in Mali was not a product of information warfare. It was a result of a collaboration between the Russian advisors in Mali and the Malian military officers who trained in Russia, the history of which goes back to the Soviet era. Malians, not Russian, cleared the way politically, working to secure and buy-in of trade unions and other power brokers in Bamako. This is important because each time these countries make strategic engagement, don't forget, African nations have a huge relationship going back to the Soviet era with Russia. And this relationship will not end all of a sudden as a result of geopolitical tension in the region. If you think that's what's going to happen, then you don't understand how the region works. So it is important, and it's vitally important, that governments and Africa's geopolitical partners start understanding that there is a history with regards to the behavior on why these countries still have this partnership with their different countries. You're not going to tell the Americans to sever their relationship with their strategic partners in Europe, and it's the same, you won't tell Niger or Burkina Faso or Mali to sever the relationship. So the US got it absolutely wrong there. Each time they try to push that narrative that it's Russia that's allowing these countries to make those decisions. It's a fundamental mistake in geopolitics. Another very important thing is that the Alliance of the Sahelian state is always perceived as a joke. But each time these governments of this region come out and form an association, especially like the AES, it's always considered to be as if they don't know what they are doing. But that's the wrong aspect of it, because at the same time as we speak, the AES continue to gather steam, with Chad now expressing interest in joining. Niger is an integral part of this new alliance and is closer to the United States and further from Russia compared to Mali and Burkina Faso. But that is not true. I think experts will argue that at the moment, Niger is calling the shot on its own. If the United States of America loses a foot in the alliance, which is very possible, it will be in result of the efforts to force Africans to choose sides. In the long run, if the US and Russia wish to continue fighting the military in the region, they will end to find ways, if not to cooperate in some areas. The notion that low-level ranking officials try to get to these countries in Africa and telling them what to do, how to go about their activities, how to reshape the policy of their country, that this is the way to go forward, is absolutely wrong. The delegation from the United States of America that went to Niger absolutely went there with total blunder in geopolitics, because they went there with the condescending approach, the demand, and also to tell the Nigerian government what they need to do and what they don't have to do. This really doesn't sit well. The tension in the country was so high that the US failed to put that into consideration when making those strategic decisions. That's the reason why the United States felt pushed back, or Niger felt threatened in instances like that. Don't forget, it wasn't so long that Niger asked France to leave the country. These countries cannot make some strategic choices and decisions if they have a foreign military in their country. It is a problem, and Western leaders and Western partners must understand that, because if you really want to work in a counterterrorism aspect, there are better ways to do it. But to feel that you can settle in the country and then at the same time making decisions to try to instruct those governments on who they should work with and who they shouldn't work with. Remember, their experience with France has been devastating. So they are looking down on working with almost every partner around the world, which is necessary to tackle all the challenges that are coming up from the region. Let me know what you think with regards to the US involvement in the country of Niger, and why do you think that Niger made a strategic choice on its own, and the reason why these countries to an extent are for the first time calling the shot and making their strategic choice for their future. I want to thank you for watching. I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.